My childhood sweetheart's family had an orphan who had come to live with her relatives. She imitated my every move, wearing red clothes, adorning a red jade, and reading medical books. She shamelessly chased Pei Yun. Pei Yun, deeply annoyed, harassed her with every possible means and humiliation, abandoning her at night in a dilapidated temple outside the city. Kneel down at the general's mansion before dawn, and I'll marry you. The city gates opened at noon, and everyone knew it was another prank, mocking the orphan for her own humiliation. But I could see the love levels of others. That night, with every step she took, Pei Yun's love level rose by 1 point. He had always been stubborn, and so had I. So, even though my heart was broken, I had to return the token of love first. This time, he didn't try to coax me but sneered. You're 19 years old, and only then will you be released from mourning. Who else would marry you but me? But I turned around and accepted the marriage proposal from the dying, sickly prince of the palace, and married off in grand style. Even if I, Jean Xiaorua, were to remain a widow, I would never eat a half-cooked meal. Lucien was taken by Pei Yun to a dilapidated temple outside the city. When I arrived upon hearing the news, I happened to see Pei Yun, who had said he was leaving, hiding himself and climbing a tree. My eyes followed the woman in red not far away. The spring air was chilly. She wore thin clothing, and with every step she took, she tumbled. She swayed precariously, as if the wind would blow her down with the slightest inadvertent movement. A faint red line caught my eye, and the number above it shifted constantly. 12, 13, 14. With each kowtow Lucienne knelt, her score increased by 1 point. Seeing this, I paused. I have a secret. When I was 10, I fell seriously ill, and suddenly I could see a red line connecting a man and a woman, sometimes darker, sometimes lighter. The constantly changing number above it was called the love point. The higher the love value, the darker the red line, the stronger the feelings. Lucien chased Pei Yun all day, claiming to be his wife-to-be, but I never cared. It was because I could see clearly. The red line connecting the two of us was so pale it was almost invisible. Pei Yun had no interest in her. But now the number I thought would never change was creeping up. You're relying on your pitiful background to shamelessly pursue young Master Pei. You're truly shameless. Hongye, the personal maid, gritted her teeth. Pei Yun and I were childhood sweethearts, and in her heart, Pei Yun was destined to be mine. Naturally, she disliked everything about Lucien. She tugged at my sleeve. Miss, leave her alone. She's imitating you in every way, trying to seduce young Master Pei. Young Master is just venting her anger on your behalf. Is she really venting her anger on me? I stared blankly at the crimson line, darkening noticeably in the moonlight, and the still climbing number. Anxiety welled up in my heart. Pei Yun, a martial arts practitioner since childhood, had always been perceptive. Hongye and I had made considerable advances. When we arrived he should have noticed. Unless, he was completely focused on another person. Nothing else was visible. Ah! A sudden exclamation interrupted my thoughts. I looked in the direction of the sound and nearly cried out in shock. A wolf had appeared in front of Lucien, baring its bloodthirsty fangs and glaring at her fiercely. She collapsed to the ground in fear. She clutched a thumb-thick branch, her voice trembling. Don't come over here. I'm not afraid of you. I quietly returned to the carriage with Hongye. Luckily, I'd brought a tinder with me. But when I lit the torch and returned, I saw a mess and a man and woman embracing each other after surviving the ordeal. Pei Yun, with a gesture of absolute protection, held Lucien in his arms. His tone was as harsh as ever. Are you stupid? You didn't ask for help when you saw a wolf. Lucien's voice was fragile yet firm, tinged with tears. You said you'd marry me after I'd walked this road alone. Pei Yun, if I can't marry you, I'd rather die. There's nothing I can do about you. A sigh carried to my ears on the wind. I heard Pei Yun say, okay, I'll marry you. 2. Pop. The torch fell to the ground. The red thread darkened like blood and 50 became 89. Lucien was surprised and uneasy. Then, what about Miss Jean? If she's angry. At the mention of me, Pei Yun's tone softened. Don't be fooled by Xiao Rua's harsh words. She's actually the softest-hearted person. I'll make her accept it. The moonlight is bright tonight, and my eyesight is clear. So I clearly saw Lucien staring at me, smiling and mouthing the words. I win. When I first met Lucien, she looked up like this, her expression stubborn. I know Pei Yun liked you before. But dripping water wears away stone. I believe, even if his heart is made of stone, I can make him fall in love with me. Now that stone heart has truly been worn away by her dripping water. I've always found it strange. Pei Yun always kept his distance from those he disliked. But with Lucien, he professed dislike, yet he repeatedly made things difficult for her, approaching her and bullying her. Now I realize it's not that he wasn't moved, it's just that he was always so slow. And love can also be accumulated over time. Shameless little bitch. Hongye, who had arrived, was about to charge forward angrily, but I held her back. Go back. The little girl's eyes flushed with rage. Miss, why don't you go and snatch young Master Pei back? Snatch? How? Pei Yun's heart is beyond my control. If he falls in love with Lucien today, I can snatch him back. What if he falls in love with Zhang Xian, or Su Xian tomorrow? My mother fought with my father's concubines for her entire life, embroiled in bloodshed. Before she died, she lost both her dignity and her wealth. My father didn't even look at her. In her death, all that was left was her beauty, withered bones, a handful of yellow sand. A heavy feeling of weakness and fatigue washed over me, and I pursed my lips. Let's go. 3 months ago, Lucien knocked on the door of the general's mansion, a token in hand. Her grandfather had a long history with the Pei family, having arranged marriages for their children. The eldest son of the Pei family was as gentle as jade, and the second son was incredibly considerate. She chose Pei Yun, the one with the worst temper. Even though Pei Yun disliked her submissiveness, he had already vowed to marry only me. To please him, Lucien worked tirelessly. She imitated me, wearing red clothes and red jade, and mimicking my every smile and frown. I was a notorious heretic in the capital, yet this noblewoman of an aristocratic family was out in the open, practicing medicine. She, too, studied medical books day and night. Pei Yun once threw a copper coin in her face in public. This is my reward. Buy a mirror and look at yourself. You're so uncouth, and yet you dare imitate my beauty. He sneered, you're imitating me, overestimating your own abilities. Such humiliation would have brought tears of shame to an ordinary woman. But Lucien was no ordinary woman. As her name suggests, her vitality is as tenacious as amaranth, growing stronger with each setback. Pei Yun has a sweet tooth. To make her traditional lotus root ice cream, she would venture from mountain to sea to find the ingredients. The girl's hands were covered in wounds, her face was covered in mud, but her eyes were terrifyingly bright. Pei Yun, I made this specially. Try it. If you like it. Before she could finish, Pei Yun interrupted impatiently, how dare you bring in any kind of morsel? Not even a dog would eat it. The dish of lotus root ice cream was eventually tossed to the guard dog by a servant. Afterwards, Pei Yun recounted it to me, seemingly taking credit for it. Who knows what she put in it? Country girls are always calculating. At that time, I hadn't met Lucien yet, so hearing her words seemed a bit excessive. I heard she treats you well, not like someone with deep thoughts. You don't understand how often these poor women try to marry into a rich family. Isn't your second wife one of them? Besides, it was drizzling, and we were alone in the corridor. He took my hand and swore, no matter how beautiful other women are, they have nothing to do with me. Pei Yun will only marry Jean Xiaorua in this life. Oaths ingrained into the heart, they easily become obsessions. These words echoed in my ears over and over again. From far away, the gentle, lingering voice gradually became hollow and eerie. A bloody dagger pierced my ear. I woke suddenly. The cold sweat on my back had already soaked my clothes. The voices outside the door were noisy, rising and falling, indistinct and unintelligible, and unnecessarily disturbing. I hadn't slept all night, and this morning, my concubine sister stopped me at the door and pestered me for a long time. But even a moment of light sleep was impossible. I frowned, put on my clothes, and got up to leave. Hongye and another little girl stood guard at the door, their hands on their hips, as if they were confronting someone. A tall, slender figure stood quietly in the courtyard. Pei-yun. 4. You want the blood Ganoderma back? Pei-yun looked away, his lips tightening. This was his usual guilty expression. Blood Ganoderma grows high and steep in the mountains, is extremely rare, and hard to find. There are less than 3 plants in all of Upper Kyoto. The one in my hand was a birthday gift from him last year. He had been searching for it for a whole year. Xiao Rua, this is urgent. Lend it to me now. I'll find you a better one later. Blood Ganoderma can cure illnesses. Lucien Cien, the orphan living in the general's mansion, was born with deficiencies and was often frail. I lowered my eyes, my gaze meeting the red thread connecting him to my wrist. The color was as bright as the one between them last night. Does Lucien hold the same place in his heart as I do now? I'll give it to you, but I have one condition. Not just one, I'll give you 10. He breathed a sigh of relief, his voice brightening. In the past, there was nothing he couldn't do when I asked him. Unfortunately, this time, he was destined to be in a difficult position. I said, send Lucien away. What does this have to do with her? Seeing his expression subconsciously frozen, I lowered my head with a self-deprecating smile, my heart completely chilled. All men in this world are the same. I'd seen it all long ago, yet I still persevered in my pursuit of truth. Pei-yun, I'm not tolerant. There's only one blood Ganoderma lucidum, and you're the same. If you give it to someone else, I won't want it. I don't like pretending to be clueless when I know the truth. Some things can't be explained at first. Lingering on is just asking for trouble. A brief flash of panic crossed Pei-yun's face. As I opened my mouth to explain, something struck me, and my brows furrowed in thought. It's just one medicine. Don't you always talk about the doctor's compassion? Why bother with so much? Everyone in the capital knows that I, Pei-yun, am just your dog. Who else could possibly matter? I could hear the resentment and indignation in his tone. The provocative words of Lucien that day flashed before my eyes. A woman should be gentle, virtuous, submissive and submissive. If you keep ordering Pei-yun around, he'll get tired of it sooner or later. I've known Pei-yun since I was 7 years old, and it's been over 12 years now. Young Master Pei, so imposing in front of others, bows down only to me. My father favored his concubine over his wife. Before my mother died, we couldn't even afford a doctor. It was New Year's Eve, and every household was decorated with lanterns and colorful lights. Because of a word I said, Pei-yun, despite his family's objections, braved the snow and rain, knocked on the doors of every clinic in the city, and finally found a doctor for me. My mother was able to survive the Lunar New Year. Most men in Beijing marry at 16, and at most 20. While I was in mourning for my mother, he, despite pressure from his parents and relatives, never took a concubine. As the youngest son, Pei-yun grew up surrounded by countless pampering, and everyone had to appease and coax him. But with me, he always did so. I had a bad temper, and so did he. But he would smooth over his thorns for me and show me his gentlest side. My mother said that no one in the world would treat me unconditionally. I vowed to her, Pei-yun will. I believed that everything he did for me was wholehearted. But I never expected that those kindnesses would one day become the source of resentment. 5. I still gave the blood Ganoderma to Pei-yun. Also, along with the red jade he had given me when my mother died. Today, I return the blood Ganoderma and the red jade to you. We part ways, and we'll have nothing to do with each other. Pei Yun's expression froze upon hearing this. Are you going to sever all ties with me just for a single Ganoderma? Who do you think I am? He was still feigning ignorance, trying to evade the main point. A wave of weakness washed over me, and I closed my eyes. Pei Yun, there are things we understand tacitly. Why play dumb? As soon as I decided to spend the rest of my life with him, I presented myself to him without reservation. He should have known I wouldn't accept sharing a husband with anyone else. Whether it was sincere or not, our fate ended when he promised Lucien to marry her. Not wanting to continue, I had the guests escorted out and closed the door. You said it. No one but me can stand your temper. Don't come back crying and beg me when the time comes. You'll observe 3 years of mourning, and you'll be released at 19. I want to see who else but me will ask to marry you after 10 days. The door panel couldn't block out his furious roar. The footsteps faded, and I couldn't hold back my tears any longer, bursting forth. I allowed myself to cry for him once. After crying, I'd move on. One day, I felt drowsy. At night, my father's servant came to find me and asked me to join him for dinner. That was strange. After my mother's death, he and the family from Weirue Pavilion lived happily together. I wished I could disappear underground and never appear before them again. But when I saw Jean Tonrua's sullen expression, I had a vague suspicion. Jean Tonrua had been engaged since childhood. The heir of the Nanyang Palace, he came from a noble family, a rare talent. It was supposed to be a perfect match. However, 6 months ago, the crown prince was poisoned and has been bedridden ever since. Famous doctors were sought throughout the land, and even the imperial physicians were consulted repeatedly, but there was no improvement. Jean Tonrua and her son had been waiting for a long time, already making plans. The Prince of Nanyang has more than one son after his death, someone else would have taken the throne. Marrying her now would have meant a lifetime of widowhood. A few days ago, the palace sent someone to discuss the wedding date. We heard that the crown prince's condition was worsening, and a marriage was urgently needed to bring good luck. How could these mother and daughter sit still? This morning, Jean Tonrua stopped me at the door and gloated over the news. The family had already made plans, waiting for me to jump into this fire pit for her. Sure enough, before the food even arrived, my father spoke. A few days ago, the Prince of Nanyang proposed a marriage, and you're the one chosen. I know you're close to Pei Yun, but he holds no official position and isn't the eldest son, so his future isn't as promising as the crown prince's. What do you think, my son? 6. The candlelight in the room was bright. The faces of everyone at the table were clearly illuminated. A hypocritical father, a pretentious stepmother, a snickering sister. Even looking at them made me sick. I scoffed. It's already been decided, so why are you asking me? Jean Tonrua covered her lips with her hand. Yes, it's our parents' order, the matchmaker's words. I certainly won't be unfilial. Her mother, Mrs. Wang, smiled gently. Ruar is sensible. Unlike Huar, who's so old but still acts like a child, speaking without restraint. Mother. Jean Tonrua grumbled, then giggled as she fell into her mother's arms, pulling at her father. Mom, you're disgusted with me, Daddy, and you don't care. A loving couple, a loving mother and a filial son. My mother and I have never experienced such a perfect scene. Jean Tonrua nestled in her parents' arms, gazing at me defiantly. After all these years, you're still only capable of these little tricks. Foolish. Facing such a family, I'm truly disgusted. The food arrived and I threw down my chopsticks. I'm not feeling well. I'll be leaving now. With that, I ignored the reactions behind me and took Hongya back to my room. Miss, the Prince of Nanyang is almost dead. Even if you're angry with young Master Pei, you can't make fun of yourself. What are we going to do now? After learning that I'd agreed to the marriage, Hongya was in a state of panic. I looked at this troubled little girl with a certain amusement. For Jean Tonrua, marrying a dying man was a pit of fire. But for me, it was an opportunity. Over the years, everyone in the capital has known about my relationship with Pei Yun. Now that he has entrusted his promise to someone else, there's no chance of being with him again. But knowing him, he won't let me go easily. No good family would be willing to offend the general's mansion to marry me. Without parents or brothers to rely on, I can't stay at home forever. Rather than waiting to hastily marry some unrefined man and compete for my husband's favor, it's better to keep a memorial tablet. Most importantly, I've heard that widowed women in Nanyang can establish their own families. Perhaps one day, opportunity will come to me. Thinking of this, the gloom I've felt for the past few days dissipated. 7. The capital has been very lively these past few days. The story of Pei Yun and Lucien reached my ears through various channels. One day, at a certain time, Pei Yun took Lucien to a certain building and spent hundreds of gold on a priceless dress. The original words were, "Xian's fair skin perfectly complements this red dress, no one can compare." One night, somewhere, Lucien was missing her deceased mother, and Pei Yun released 1,000 Kongming lanterns for her departed loved one. I originally taught him how to fly Kongming lanterns. Now, they've become a tool he uses to coax others. Jean Tonrua loves to laugh at me, and she follows me around all day whenever I go out, teasing me. I thought Pei Yun loved my sister deeply, but now it seems he's just so-so. I ignored her and walked into the restaurant. I'm getting married in 3 days. I probably won't be able to eat the food I ate in the capital for a long time. I might as well eat more now, so I can keep a memory. Not seeing my distraught state as she had hoped, Jean Tonrua stamped her feet and followed me, determined not to give up. Your future husband is a sickly man, vulnerable every day, and your ex-lover has found a new lover. How do you feel now, sister? Why don't you beg me? I'll help you speak to my parents and prepare a larger dowry, so you don't have to live for a year after your wedding. Who are you marrying? Jean Tonrua and I both looked up in surprise, gazing at the man in brocade standing by the second-floor railing. Pei Yun looked down at us, his eyes dark and sinister. Jean Tonrua and I rarely had a tacit understanding, so neither of us spoke. Jean Tonrua was afraid that if he knew, he'd block the marriage, and she'd be the one to suffer. I was also afraid that if he knew, it would lead to unnecessary entanglement. No one answered him, so he raised his voice and repeated it. Jean Tonrua, who are you marrying? The atmosphere was tense for a moment. The sweet female voice broke the ice. Ah Yun, how dare you ask that? A moment later, a woman in red sauntered up behind Pei Yun, the red jade at her waist swaying as she walked. She wore a Chaoyun bun, the fashionable look in Shangjing. The white jade hairpin in her hair, the kind I'd seen on Madame Pei's head before. Pei Yun never spared any effort in treating someone well. Lucien today had lost all the naivete she had a few days ago. She looked like a pampered young lady from a noble family. She bowed her head and bowed to me. She smiled at Pei Yun and said, "Who else in Shangjing would dare marry Miss Jean besides you? Miss Jean is marrying into the general's mansion, so naturally she'll need a larger dowry." Pei Yun's expression softened slightly. "And so, everyone knows that I've been with him for so many years. Who else would dare marry me? Besides, with my family background and reputation, where else could I find a good partner besides him?" The corners of his lips curled up, then quickly retreated, his face smug. The general's mansion isn't a place where just anyone can marry if they want or not marry if they want. This was the first time he didn't offer me a way out, instead waiting for me to bow my head and apologize. I was about to speak when a playful laugh suddenly rang out from behind Pei Yun. 8. Ah Yun just told Lucien that if she wanted to marry you, you could marry her. It seems that young Master Pei truly has two faces. Let me see, which young lady is in love with you? The man leaned forward, his voice terminating the moment he took in my gaze. His eyes widened as he looked from Pei Yun to me, wanting to speak but stopping himself. Pei Yun's gloomy gaze lingered on me. For a long moment, he looked away, embraced the girl beside him, and a doting smile spread across his lips. Xian is so well behaved, never talks back, and has done so much for me. How could I bear to reject her? He glanced at me. Unlike some people, who are heartless and ungrateful, like ungrateful wolves who can never be tamed. I ignored him and was about to go upstairs, but was stopped by the waiter who hurried downstairs. Miss Jean, Master Pei said he's booked our restaurant for today. Master Pei also said. He looked embarrassed and stumbled. He also said that from now on, whenever you come, he'll book it. I'd better try somewhere else. I glanced over. Pei Yun's thin lips curled slightly, and he casually played with Lucien's hair. The young master of the general's mansion would spare no effort to embarrass someone. Today's meal was destined to be missed. With a deep sigh, I turned and left. As I reached the door, I could still hear Pei Yun's deliberately amplified voice. Young master is drawn to gentle and well-behaved women like Xian, unlike someone who is disloyal. I paused and continued walking. Jean Tonrua squeezed onto the carriage, sneered with a gloating tone. Sister, you should thank me for giving up the marriage proposal from the palace. Otherwise, if Pei Yun didn't want you, what good marriage could you have found in the capital? My patience ran out, and I slapped her across the face. She covered her face in disbelief, her eyes blazing with anger. How dare you hit me? You used to be so arrogant, relying on Pei Yun's influence. Now Pei Yun finds you offensive even when he looks at you. How dare you be so arrogant? Another slap. I wiped my hands with my handkerchief, examining the red mark on her cheek with interest. Symmetry now. You're right. I've lost my support, and I'm about to jump into the fire again. At this point, what else is there to worry about? I sneered. You can go back and complain. It's best if my father beats me to death. Otherwise, I'll bang my head against the wall in front of the mansion on our wedding day. The barefoot are not afraid of the shod. I, Jean Cherua, have never been one to accept things passively. Even if I marry the sick prince, you must still respect me as the crown prince's consort. You. She pointed at me and called me you for a long time, her face red with anger, but she dared not say another word. She covered her face and ran away, sobbing. 9. After Jean Tonrua left, I sent Hongye and the groom back to the mansion and walked alone to the observatory. The previous emperor, seeking immortality, built the observatory and summoned sorcerers from all over the world. During the palace coup, all the sorcerers and palace maids in the observatory were trapped inside and burned to death in the blazing fire. During the dynasty's renovations, workmen often died under mysterious circumstances, and some even heard screams and wails emanating from within. The reconstruction was halted before completion, and now it lies abandoned in a corner of the western city, where no one dares approach. The surrounding area is overgrown with weeds and few people are seen. The dusk rolled in. After confirming that no one was passing by, I parted the grass that was covering it, revealing a hole in the corner of the wall. This was my secret base. When I was young, my maternal grandfather's family was convicted, and my father no longer favored my mother, leaving all power in the mansion to the Wang family. Jean Tonrua formed cliques in the academy, bullying the weak with her numbers. I was so weak at the time that I couldn't even defeat her alone. Once I was chased here, desperate, and crawled into the cave, where I spent the night. That night the stars shone brightly, the moon shone endlessly. All the grievances and fears in my heart vanished beneath the vast Milky Way. Later, whenever I felt down, I would spend the entire day here. The top floor of the observatory is spacious, offering a panoramic view of half the city. Even the biggest worries seem insignificant. Only here do I feel that there's still a place in this world that belongs to me. I lay down in a familiar spot and drifted off to sleep. When I woke, it was already dark. I faintly heard a voice. Host strategy, speed up. A blurry fragment of voice drifted into my ears. I stood up, cautiously concealing myself in the shadows. About 7 feet away, a familiar figure stood. The red dress fluttered. It was Lucienne. She stood there alone, mumbling something to herself. No. My eyes fluttered. She wasn't talking to herself, the other voice clearly wasn't hers. But she was clearly alone there. There was no obstruction where she stood, there couldn't be anyone I couldn't see. The other voice seemed to appear out of nowhere, and she and the other voice exchanged words, arguing endlessly. I held my breath, afraid she'd notice. Unfortunately, we were too far away, so I could only hear a few vague, meaningless words. Something about pay yun, favorability, and strategy progress, words I couldn't understand. I could guess a little about favorability, it was probably something like love. This Lucienne wasn't just an orphan. But who was she? Was this sorcery or magic? 10. My mind was a blur, and I shook my head. In the blink of an eye, I focused again, and the Lucienne, who had been there just now, had suddenly vanished. I frantically looked around, but there was no sign of anyone for a long time. As I turned to leave, a figure flashed through my peripheral vision. My heart skipped a beat and I dodged. I saw that the Lucienne, who had mysteriously vanished, was standing where I had been, holding a dagger, staring at me fiercely. I wanted to spare your life, but you bumped into me yourself. She looked completely different now than I'd ever seen her before. She clutched a knife, her face etched with murderous intent. She didn't even show the slightest sign of compromise before Pei Yun. She raised her dagger and charged at me. She was so fast I couldn't dodge, and I could only fend off her attacks with my bare hands. She pressed her full strength against my hand. Even though I tried to block it, the tip of the knife kept moving closer and closer to my heart. If this continues, I'll die here. In an instant, I don't know where I found the strength, but I steeled myself and turned the knife. A noise came from the stairs. Lucien said coldly and shrilly, "Even if you kill me, I won't leave Ayun." I saw the curve of her lips, and I knew something was wrong. I quickly pulled away, but it was too late. The sound of flesh being pierced was clear, and a large pool of blood immediately formed on the chest of the person before me. She was dressed in red, blood-soaked, as if she had been pulled from the water. Jean Xiaorua. Pei Yun's shocked and angry voice brought me back from my shock. I quickly let go of her hand, only to find it was drenched in blood. Lucienne, her face etched with pain, staggered and fell. Anyone observing this scene would have thought I was the perpetrator. Pei Yun flew to catch Lucienne, roaring, "What have you done?" I never imagined Lucienne would go to such lengths to frame me. Alas, I'm not someone who can be manipulated. The dagger is hers, and she stabbed herself. If you don't believe me, go see a doctor and examine the wound. It's easy to tell the difference between a self-inflicted wound and one stabbed by someone else. Lucienne coughed weakly, tears welling in her eyes. No, don't blame her. It was me. Covered in blood, her face pale, she cowered in Pei Yun's arms. Pei Yun's favorability increased by 5, for a total of 99. 11. This is that voice. I observed Lucienne's expression calmly. A barely perceptible curve curved the corners of her lips. I then looked at the red line between her and Pei Yun. My love for her remained at 89, unchanged. It seemed these two were not the same thing. Just hearing this voice suddenly made me even more certain that Lucienne was no ordinary person. So she must have had a hidden agenda in approaching Pei Yun. Thinking of the demons in the storybooks who murdered and ripped out hearts, a sinister premonition seized me. Pei Yun, listen to me. Lucienne spat out a mouthful of black blood, and Pei Yun's fury deepened. Still trying to argue. Are you saying she poisoned your dagger beforehand, risking her life to frame you? I frowned, staring at the still unsheathed dagger on her chest. The more I looked at it, the more familiar it felt. I was startled. This dagger was Pei Yun's 15th birthday gift. But I had already sent it back along with all his other gifts. Could this Lucienne really be some kind of demon? If so, I'm afraid she could even fake the wound. For the first time, I understood what it meant to be powerless, unable to defend myself. Speechless. Pei Yun sneered, hand over the antidote. There's still room for reversal. I've already returned the dagger to you. As for the antidote, I'm sorry I can't help you. I said this irritably, and was about to leave. After taking a few steps, I felt a numbness in my lower back, and I collapsed to the ground. As I fell, I tilted my head and saw Pei Yun's hand still attached. He squatted down, his tone softening, Xiao Rua, stop it. Where's the antidote? I know I've been too much these days, but you were the one who got me angry first. She's just a little girl. If you hand over the antidote and apologize sincerely, I promise to come and ask you to marry me in 3 days. I gritted my teeth and rolled out of his arms. It wasn't me, you said. If I don't take her to see a doctor, she'll really die. Pei Yun looked at his hand, which had fallen away, and said good morning 3 times in a row. Then you'll lie here for the night and reflect on your actions. With that, he picked up Lucienne and strode away. Pei Yun pressed my acupuncture points, leaving my limbs limp and weak. I don't know how much time had passed, but as I drifted off to sleep, a strange smell wafted into my nose. A faint crackling sound accompanied it. The smell grew stronger, and the sound grew louder. I jolted awake to see thick smoke rising into the air. There was a fire. The sudden onset of the blaze caught me off guard. Half my body was numb and weak, and even forcing myself to stand straight had already cost me most of my strength, leaving me drenched in sweat. The fire was coming from below. Smoke poured out of the stairs, and I feared this path was blocked. I trudged towards the edge, step by step. The observatory was higher than the city wall, and the view down was terrifying. Will I burn to death or fall to my death? Gritting my teeth, I climbed over the railing, closed my eyes, and leaped down without a care in the world. Death or life, it's all earned. 12. Headache. That was the only feeling I had after waking up. Miss, you're finally awake. Hongya screamed, hugging me tightly. You've been asleep all day and all night, and you scared me terribly. I listened quietly as she recounted what happened after the fall. It turned out that it was the prince of the Nanyang Palace who saved me that day. He rushed to pick up the bride, braving the night to enter the city. He happened to encounter a fire, and seeing a figure upstairs, he ordered the palace guards to gather cloth and blankets and catch me. It was a bit too coincidental. By the way, miss, young Master Pei came looking for you. At this, Hongya's face darkened, and she angrily bit off the pastry in her hand. She murmured, I thought he treated the young lady very well, but this time he's really gone too far. He actually said the young lady was vicious, and wanted to harm that orphan girl, and he even dared to threaten her. What did he say? I asked. If she doesn't apologize, the previous agreement will be void, and she'll never be able to marry into the general's mansion again. The little girl imitated Pei Yun's tone and demeanor, making me laugh. Pei Yun and I had a prior agreement. I mourned for my mother for 3 years, and after the Mid-Autumn Festival, he came to propose marriage. Pei Yun, who had made such a promise back then, probably never imagined he would use this to threaten me today, right? But none of this affected the smooth progress of the wedding. I hadn't been looking forward to this marriage. But as I woke up early and bustled around changing into my wedding gown, a feeling of inexplicable emotion welled up within me. The wedding dress and shoes were originally intended for Jean Tonrua. She was shorter than me, and after a few steps, her feet were squeezed and painful. I slipped carelessly and twisted my ankle. Be careful. A large hand held my hand. The man's voice was gentle, not as frail as I'd imagined. With a sudden thought, I pretended to stagger and deftly grasped his hand. His pulse was weak and slow, indicating a severe poison. I suppressed my thoughts, stepped over the threshold, and walked out. From then on, it was a different world. 13. I boarded the bridal sedan and lifted the veil. The joyful music played, and the sedan swayed. After walking for about an incense stick, there was a commotion outside. It sounded like someone was riding a horse in the street, recklessly charging towards us. Soon, I heard Pei Yun's urgent voice, "Xiao Rua." He had found out after all. I knew Pei Yun would throw a tantrum once he found out. After today, I wonder how many more stories he'll come up with. Although the Nanyang Palace isn't of royal blood, it's still a regional princely state. After today's commotion, I'm afraid my good days are numbered. Who are you? I was stunned. I hadn't expected the crown prince to personally appear. Pei Yun ignored him and shouted, "Jean Xiaorua, come out. If you dare to marry someone else, what are the meaning of our vows of love for so many years?" He spoke without restraint, his words unclear. I could almost hear countless people outside pointing fingers and calling me unfaithful. The accompanying palace guards stepped forward to stop him, but naturally they couldn't stop him, a man of military descent. People fell. Pei Yun walked to the front of the sedan chair, bent down, and reached out, as if to lift the curtain. At the critical moment, another figure blocked the way. "You are General Pei's youngest son, right? I am Xie Xingyun of the Nanyang Palace." "Get out," Pei Yun said gravely. Xie Xingyun appeared remarkably composed in the face of his rudeness. He spoke slowly. "I, Xie, arrived in Beijing 3 days ago, and happened to encounter a fire at the observatory. I saved a woman from jumping from the building. I'm a little confused. The observatory hadn't been repaired in a long time, and the recent heavy rains have dampened it. Even if the fire started on the first floor, the people on the rooftop could have escaped after noticing it. Why wait until the fire spread and then jump to save their lives?" Later, I learned that the woman's acupuncture points had been applied, preventing her from escaping and nearly perishing in the fire. "What did you say?" Pei Yun, as if he had just realized something, suddenly became anxious. "Xiao Rua, are you hurt? How come I didn't know?" He pushed Xie Xingyun aside recklessly and pulled open the curtains of the sedan chair. Luckily, I had covered my head with the veil when he first arrived. "Don't be afraid. I'll take you away. In a few days, or even today, I'll go to your house to propose marriage." Fearing he might act rashly, I interrupted him. "No need. You said it, not just anyone can marry into the general's mansion. My status and position are simply unworthy. Pei Yun, I'm grateful for your help over the years, but I also believe I haven't given nothing in return. When you were 10, you fell into the water, and I risked my life to pull you ashore. When you were 14, you were poisoned and I tested the medicine on myself. When you were 17, your family was in trouble, and I rushed around for days." I paused, then continued softly, "If all that isn't enough, I nearly lost my life because of you in the stargazing pavilion. I'm even with you now. If you still have some regard for our old friendship, please spare me some grace and let me go." Pei Yun. Through the red veil. Pei Yun's back staggered away, a look of loss and embarrassment. 14. The journey from Shangjing to Nanyang took 7 days. Xie Xingyun, frail, collapsed upon leaving the city, and took a carriage to drink ginseng soup to recuperate. I stayed by his side. During our daily interactions, I discovered that the Prince of Nanyang was gentle, respectful, and frugal in his conduct. Despite his noble birth, he was not overly proud. However, he was frail, coughing 3 times every 10 steps, making long journeys difficult. Thus, I was curious as to why he had come to pick up his bride himself. Thinking so, I asked. He replied, "It was already unfortunate for you to marry me, but I can't change the engagement. I'll do my best to make amends." He looked haggard after days of traveling. His handsome face was marked by the lingering signs of illness, yet it didn't look lifeless. Instead, it had a different kind of morbid beauty. It seems even the sick can be soft on a beautiful woman. After all, Xie Xingjuan is a year younger than me. A surge of pity welled up in my heart, and I cared for him even more sincerely. The temperature in Nanyang was rising. The jolting carriage was so bumpy that, not only Xie Xingjuan was in poor health, but even I was beginning to feel the strain. I finally checked into the inn before dark. Xie Xingjuan must have been the one having the hardest time, but he still got out of the car and walked me to my room before leaving with peace of mind. "Wait for me, I'll pick you up tomorrow." His voice was a little weak, a gentle smile on his lips. After he completely disappeared, I closed the door, removed my hairpins and jewelry, and collapsed onto the bed, exhausted. Tap. The slight movement was unusually noticeable in the empty room. I waited for a long while, hearing no more, before getting up and scanning the room. The best room in the inn was spacious, meaning there was plenty of room for someone to hide. I forced myself to remain calm and slowly walked to the door. As my hand touched the door, a familiar scent hit me from behind, covering my mouth and nose. Guessing who it was, my heart relaxed. 15. A warm breath caressed my neck. A deep voice whispered in my ear, "It's me, Pei Yun." I nodded, and the hand that was restraining me slowly loosened. "Did your father force you to marry someone else?" Pei Yun's eyes were red, and his hands clutched my shoulders tightly. "Of course it must be. Xie Xingjuan is a short-lived man. If Jean Tan didn't want to marry, he'd force you to. Don't be afraid. I'm here. No one can force you." I interrupted his reverie. "I did it of my own free will. I thought I'd made it clear that day in front of the bridal sedan." He left in a daze the day, and I assumed he'd figured it out. Who knew he'd follow me all the way to Nanyang? Looking at his unshaven beard and bloodshot eyes, I guess he hadn't rested much along the way. I was fed up with this constant nagging, so I simply tore off all the window paper. "I was there when you married Ing Liuxian outside the city." As soon as he finished speaking, Pei Yun's face instantly lost all color, turning incredibly pale. He murmured, "How could it be?" He looked at me in disbelief. "There's no way I wouldn't notice." I smiled helplessly. "You were obsessed with Lucien, so naturally you wouldn't notice. You said you'd marry her, and you said I'd accept her." "Sorry, Pei Yun, I'll never accept her. I fear that one day, like my mother, I'll become a wretch fighting for a man's love. I'm even more afraid that Pei Yun will use every possible means to force me to accept someone else, just as my father did to my mother. So, I'd rather give up 12 years of love and marry a sickly woman destined for a short life." "No." Pei Yun withdrew his hand, taking a helpless step back. "I don't believe you'll let it go. If that were the case, why would you be so angry about the blood Ganoderma? And that day in the stargazing pavilion, you hurt Lucien for me." I felt powerless. Xuelingji wasn't just angry that day. I was saying goodbye to you sincerely. As for Lucien, I've already said it, I didn't hurt her. Thinking of the inexplicable fire in the stargazing pavilion, I still reminded him with concern. "I want to remind you, she's not as simple as she appears. If you want to marry her, please think carefully. That's all I have to say. I'm someone else's wife now. If you keep pestering me, I'll call for help." With that, I opened the door and slipped away while he was stunned. 16. There's no intrigue in the Nanyang Palace. The prince and princess love each other deeply, and all 4 of their children are born to her. After I entered the palace, my mother-in-law specifically forgoes her greetings because Xie Xingyun was not feeling well. I worried for days about the incident on my wedding day, but no one ever mentioned it. Xie Xingyun treated me very well. I learned that when I was in the capital, I often practiced medicine. He personally went to the prince to ask for my free access to the palace. He also allowed me to open a clinic to treat the poor. He treated me sincerely, so I reciprocated by researching a detoxification method for him. However, he had been poisoned for a long time, the poison had penetrated his lungs, and I could only suppress it with difficulty to prevent him from suffering too much. The years passed quietly, and another mid-autumn festival arrived. I closed the clinic and was about to return to the palace when a crazed figure in red blocked my way. The figure was disheveled and mumbled something about strategies and systems. The voice sounded familiar. I parted her hair and saw it was Lucienne. She grabbed my hand, calling me Ah Yun affectionately at one moment and bitch fiercely at another. I hurried back to the palace and was about to arrange for someone to take her away when someone looking for her arrived. As expected, it was Pei Yun. After not seeing each other for a year, his high spirits had completely vanished. Instead, he was exhausted. When he saw me, his expression shifted constantly. Surprise, sadness, and embarrassment. How could she be like this? I spoke to break the ice. Pei Yun chuckled to himself and explained the situation in a few words. A year ago, Pei Yun, listening to my words, became suspicious of Lucienne. After returning home, I patiently observed her and discovered that she often muttered to herself behind people's backs. Pei Yun discovered her conspiracy against me and, filled with disgust, threatened to expel her from the house. She refused to leave and in desperation, she drugged Pei Yun. The two were caught in the act by the Pei family. Pei Yun, forced to marry her, naturally loathed her even more. From that day on, Lucienne began to act mad, always searching for something called a system. I guess she didn't have any magical powers. Without that system, she would be just an ordinary person, perhaps even mad. And Pei Yun, she would probably be tormented for the rest of their lives. I sighed deeply and was about to leave when Pei Yun called me back. Xiao Rua, you said you can't tolerate any ingratitude in your eyes, but did you know that before Xie accident, he and Jean Tonrua had pledged their lives together? 17. I smiled and said nothing. Of course I knew. The day I left the Jean residence, I saw a red string on Xie hand beneath his red veil. The bright color signified a love value of 80. Thinking back, Jean Tonrua was the only one in the mansion who knew him personally. They had been engaged since childhood, so it wasn't surprising that they had private contact. When he personally went to the capital, he probably wanted to meet Jean Tonrua. He didn't marry the woman he wanted, and he didn't vent his anger on me, so I pretended not to know. Living with someone you don't love, turning a blind eye, is the only way to maintain peace. I lifted the curtain of the sedan chair. A man in blue stood before the palace's vermilion lacquered gate, holding a lantern. Seeing the carriage, he approached, supported by his attendants. You're not feeling well, why are you out here enjoying the breeze? I grumbled. He waved his hand, his face as gentle as when we first met. It's nothing. I saw you haven't returned for a long time. I guess you're too busy outside, so I had to come out to meet you. He took my hand and walked in. On my wrist, a red line shone brightly, indicating a love value of 98. Looking back, I had blindly believed this value, believing that as long as it remained unchanged, Pei Yun would always love only me. In reality, even after spending over a decade loving me, Pei Yun would fall in love with Lucienne, who pursued him relentlessly. Xie loved Jean Tonrua for many years, and he would fall deeply in love with me within a year. It's not that I'm particularly attractive, but that he loves me as his only wife. The same would be true for anyone else. I'm grateful for Xie love and kindness, and I don't deny my feelings for him. But I will never pin all my hopes on him. Perhaps God has given me the gift of seeing the red thread. It's to help me see clearly that the love of men in this world is like a palace piled high in mud and sand. It may appear magnificent, but its foundation is weak. It's better to love yourself than to seek love from others. Only then can you bloom like a spring flower, undefeated by mud.